My name is Shanny. I'm a chef up at Simply Good Kitchen, and I'd like to talk to you about what knives are important to have in your kitchen for ease of cooking. Well, when we come into the kitchen, we call these our two workhorse knives in the kitchen. The knife on the bottom is called a cook's knife. The knife on the top is called an Asian cook's knife. You can see what these two knives have in common. They both have nice long blades, but they both have what we call an offset handle. You can see the handle is offset from the cutting blade, so that means when I grab hold of this knife, my knuckles are set well above the cutting blade, so when I go to chop, my knuckles are not going to hit the board with this knife. This knife, same thing, the Santaku or the Asian cook's knife, my knuckles are set well above the cutting edge, and if I went to go do some chopping with this, you can see my knuckles are not getting in the way. So your workhorse knives in the kitchen, they'll do all your slicing and dicing for you. This knife here is called a boning knife. This is the knife you like to use when you are going to trim up a tenderloin, bone out a chicken, or say you got that honey baked ham and there's all that meat left on the bone and you don't know how to get it off. That's what this little rounded area is for. You get it in there and you get it around the bone. So it's a boning knife. It's a great knife to have if you do butchering of things in your own kitchen. This knife is called a paring knife. This does not chop, it doesn't slice, it doesn't dice. It pares out little like spots out of an apple, an onion, you know, some kind of piece of fruit, some vegetable. But this is just gonna do little jobs for you. But it's important to have that knife. This knife is called a bread knife. You can see this knife has serrated teeth on it. The serrated teeth will go ahead and grip into whatever it is you're slicing, you know, what kind of bread, you get that crusty bread, and this will cut through that crust for you. And the blade is long, so it will be longer than your bread, so you can go back and forth with it with ease. And then last, this knife is called a slicing knife. This one technically is called a buffet slicing knife. It's because it has a rounded tip on it. That's if you were working a buffet and you were slicing beef or something and you went to go use the knife to hand it to the person, you can't impale them. So that's why you have that nice rounded tip. But again, you got that big beef tenderloin and you need something that will go all the way through it. So that's why you're looking for a knife like this, a slicing knife. And notice on the slicing knife, the blade is not offset from the handle, so my knuckles are almost even there with the blade. With saying that, you can see you couldn't chop with this knife because your knuckles get in the way. These little air gaps or divots in the blade, what that does not make it serrated. What that does is that's an air gap, like we said earlier. So when you're slicing things, it will fall away from the blade for you instead of adhering itself to the blade. So with that, we hope that you have a nice collection of knives in your kitchen to use, and thank you for joining us. Well, now that we have talked about the style of knives and what the knives do, we'd like to talk about the difference between a forged knife and a stamped knife. When you look at a knife like this, and my husband Bill and I, both being chefs, these are our preferred knife of choice. These are Wusthof brand knives. But these are what we call a forged knife. And when you look at them, you can see how thick this collar is and how the metal goes all the way through the handle, both sides, and then continues to the blade. When they forge a knife, what they do is they take a piece of metal, and this is mainly carbon steel with a little bit of stainless steel in there so the knife doesn't oxidize on you. And they take that and they kind of smush it and then forge it out to create the knife. When it's a forged knife, you'll have an equal weight of the handle to an equal weight of the blade. So you can usually, with ease, balance that knife on your finger here. You can see I'm balancing it on my one finger. That means when you grab hold of this knife, it's balanced and it feels good. You're thinking, wow, why does this knife feel so good? It's because it's balanced, and then you just do all your work with it, and that's that on a forged knife. So these four knives are forged knives. These two knives are stamped knives. And when we say it's a stamped knife, you can see it's one thin or even thickness of metal that goes all the way through, does not carry through on the other side, back side of the knife. Just on the top side, they take a piece of metal, they stamp it, they put an edge on it, they put a handle on it, and that's your stamped knife. When you're working with big knives like this, we don't feel it's necessary that you need to have a forged knife for these knives, but when you're working with these knives all the time in your hand, you want to have that nice balance for your chopping, slicing, and dicing. So with that, we like to thank you for joining us on our knife talk, and enjoy cooking.